His hand brushed my back slow, tender, like it meant something, but the truth is it wasn't him I was thinking of. It was them. The ones on the porch. The ones who'd laughed with my dad over cigars and whiskey like they owned the night. The ones who looked at me a little too long and not long enough. He kissed my shoulder, just like always. Soft, warm, practiced. A kiss that said, I love you. But not, I see you. And when he stepped aside, when he walked out of the room that night, when the door clicked gently shut behind him, I didn't stop them. I didn't say a word. The door was unlocked. They walked in like they knew they were meant to. And maybe deep down, I'd left it open for them. If you want to feel more. If you're the kind of person who aches in quiet places, who craves things they don't even know how to name, then stay. Subscribe to Olivia Touching Tales. We go slow here. We feel deep here. Pause, a breath, a shift back to the moment. He kissed me like a promise. Like I was the only thing he ever wanted, and maybe I was, but even then I was full of questions I never asked him. Questions like, do you really see me when you touch me? Would you still love me if I needed more than just you? Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to watch me be worshipped by someone else? The kind of questions that live in your throat, but never make it past your lips. That night the sky outside was purple. Summer. Heavy. Electric. You know the kind of heat that wraps around you like a second skin? Where the air feels alive. And so do you? Yeah. It was one of those nights, my dad had gone to bed early. The three of them stayed behind. His oldest friends. The kind that don't knock. The kind that know where the liquor is, where the old stories are buried. And maybe, where the fire in me had been quietly burning for years. I was in the kitchen. Bare feet. Wine glass in my hand. I could hear their voices outside low and slow, and something about it. God, something about it just lit me up. Not in that cheap, obvious way. In that deep, forgotten way. The way that makes your skin remember you're alive. He came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his chin on my shoulder. I didn't move. Not because I didn't love him, but because in that moment, I was already somewhere else, already imagining what it would feel like. To be really seen, to be touched like a woman who wasn't made of glass. To be undressed without apology. To be craved without permission, and maybe that makes me terrible. Or maybe it just makes me honest. So I stood there, his arms around me, their laughter rolling in from the porch like thunder, and I thought, what would happen if I just didn't stop it? What if I let the story write itself this time? What if I gave myself to something that scared me? Because it also made me feel more alive than I'd felt in years? You ever feel that? Like you're holding something inside you so big, so heavy, so loud, but the world keeps asking you to whisper? That was me. That night. And when the door opened, when I heard the creak of the old floorboards, when three pairs of eyes met mine, I didn't flinch. I didn't hide. I didn't say no. Because maybe the story doesn't start with a kiss. Maybe it starts with a decision. Not to cheat. Not to betray. But to finally feel to let in the part of me I'd been locking out for far too long, and maybe that's why I let all three of Dad's friends in. Not just into the house, but into me. My fear, my longing, my truth. You want to know what happened next, don't you? Yeah, I'll tell you, but not all at once. We go slow here. We breathe through it, because some stories, the ones that really touch you, you don't just listen to them. You live them. Stay with me. I'll tell you everything. The house was glowing. Not just with light, but with that golden, late summer warmth. The kind that soaks into the wood and lingers in the air like perfume. The breeze moved through the curtains like a whisper. Soft, tempting, uninvited, but welcome. I stood barefoot on the old kitchen tiles, the ones my father never replaced. Cracked, imperfect, warm from the sun that had just dipped behind the trees. My dress clung to me in all the right ways, not because I wanted to be seen, but because some part of me was ready to be. There was a sound outside. Low, rumbling laughter. Familiar. Masculine. The kind of laugh that travels through the chest before it ever reaches the mouth. 3 of them. Men who'd been part of my childhood in quiet, background ways. They never tried too hard. Never crossed lines. But they were always there. The one with the deep voice and silver at his temples. The one with eyes that never stayed long but always looked back once. And the one who smiled with just half his mouth. Like he knew secrets he'd never speak. They were drinking again. The kind of drinking that wasn't about forgetting, but remembering. Old war stories. Family losses. Stories about my dad. Stories about me, maybe. I don't know. I could hear the clink of ice in heavy glasses. Could smell the whiskey even from here. Could feel the hum of their presence pulsing through the floorboards like a slow, steady drum. And I should have gone upstairs. I should have slipped out of that dress, pulled on a t-shirt, crawled into the safety of the man who slept in my bed. But I didn't. I stood at the counter, tracing circles on the glass of wine in my hand, listening to them laugh and feeling it. Not in my ears. In my body. He walked in behind me. Not loud. Not abrupt. Just him. I didn't have to look to know it was him. The scent of cedar and laundry soap. The heat of his chest just inches from my back. His hand slid around my waist, familiar, certain. And I let him pull me in. Let his chin rest on my shoulder. Let myself breathe the rhythm we'd created over the years. It was good. It was safe. It was love. But it wasn't fire. He kissed my neck. Soft, slow, like a habit. And I felt nothing but the urge to feel more. I leaned into him anyway. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You lean in. Even when you're aching elsewhere. He whispered something. A joke about the old guys outside, how they were probably telling the same 3 stories again. I smiled like I meant it, but my ears weren't listening to him. They were outside. On the porch. With them. Their voices weren't loud. They didn't have to be. One of them had a laugh that curved around my spine like a hand. The kind of laugh that said he didn't take life too seriously, but could get very serious when it counted. Another had that stillness. You know the type. The kind of man who doesn't need to move to be noticed. Who can make a room shift with just a look. Who doesn't fill space, he controls it. And the third. He had something darker. An energy just beneath the surface. Contained. Quiet. But I'd seen the way his hands moved when he talked. Precise. Intentional. Dangerous, maybe. Or maybe just exact. I stood there in my kitchen, wrapped in a man who loved me, and imagined how it would feel to be unwrapped by men who didn't. Not out of cruelty. Not even lust. But something else. Something older. More primal. Not the need to have me, but to witness me. To take me in like a sunset you don't touch. You just stand there, breathing hard, letting it undo you. I didn't move. Not for a long time. He whispered something again. And this time, I didn't hear it at all. Because I was too busy imagining one of them behind me instead. A hand sliding down my back. That didn't know my body like a map, but wanted to explore it like an undiscovered island. I'll let you have your wine, he said finally, kissing my shoulder. And just like that he was gone. Back to the den. Back to the world where we were still okay. Back to safety. And I was alone with the silence. And the 3 voices outside. One of them said my name. Not loud. Not like a call. Just like a memory. Like he was savoring it on his tongue. And God. Something broke inside me when I heard it. Not because it was wrong. But because it felt so right. Like hearing your favorite song in a strange city. Like realizing you've been thirsty for years. And suddenly someone holds out a glass of cold water. I walked to the sink. Refilled my glass. But I wasn't thinking about the wine. I was thinking about what I would do. If they turned and looked at me. And didn't look away. If they followed me with their eyes. Not like I was his. Not like I was someone's daughter. But like I was a woman. Breathing. Wanting. Asking. The curtain fluttered at the window, and in the reflection of the glass, I saw them. Not clearly. Just outlines. movement, shadows in the gold light. And I saw myself, lit up in a way I hadn't been in years. And I knew something was coming, something I couldn't stop, and didn't want to, because I wasn't just watching anymore. I was waiting. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was ready. He tried. Every day, he tried. Soft kisses, thoughtful dinners, late-night conversations with the TV turned low and his hand on my thigh like a promise. He brought me flowers on Thursdays, because I once told him they made the week feel less long. He rubbed my shoulders when I came home tired. He always asked me how I was doing. And meant it. God, he meant it. He made love like a man who respected me, who believed in the word forever. He touched me gently, like I might break. And for a long time, I convinced myself that gentleness was enough. That tenderness was the same thing as knowing me. That love meant never asking for more than someone was already giving. But deep inside, there was this quiet hum, a hunger, small at first, then sharper, then impossible to ignore. There were nights I stared at the ceiling after he'd fallen asleep, his breath warm against my neck, his arm heavy across my waist, and I would lay there still, silent, while something in me whispered, "Is this it?" Not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't feel seen. Not in the way I ached to be. He tried. He really did. He'd light candles. He'd run baths. He'd ask if I wanted to be touched. And I'd say yes. And he would try. But it was like he was following instructions in a language that wasn't native to him. And I would perform. Smiles, moans, gratitude. I would perform so hard that I started forgetting what it felt like to just receive. Because it always ended too soon, or too gently, or just not quite right. Like a note played just slightly off key. Not wrong, but not true. I remember one night, the air thick with summer, the sheets twisted around our legs. He'd been careful, sweet, patient, and when it was over, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "Was that good for you?" And I smiled, like I always did, and I nodded, and I told him, yes. But I was lying, not just to him, to myself, because inside I was still reaching, still unfinished, still craving. Not more of what he was already giving, but something else entirely. I didn't want to be worshipped like a saint. I didn't want to be handled like silk. I wanted to be unraveled. I wanted hands on me that didn't hesitate, eyes that looked at me like a problem they wanted to solve, mouths that didn't ask for permission, but read me like a map, and moved like they already knew where I broke open. There's a certain kind of ache that doesn't scream. It whispers. Every day. Until the whisper becomes a pulse. And the pulse becomes a need. And I needed to feel undone. To be touched like someone who was more than a good girl. I wanted to be devoured. Not just loved. Not just cared for. I wanted to be taken apart. Piece by piece. Until all that was left was breath and skin and a woman who wasn't pretending anymore. But I never said that. Because how do you ask for that? From the person who brings you tea when you're sick? Who folds your laundry just the way you like it? Who calls your mother without being reminded? How do you ask for chaos when all you've ever been given is peace? So I smiled. I kissed him back. I told myself I was lucky. Because I was. And I swallowed the ache. Every single time. Until the ache started looking for a way out. And it found it. In the way one of them looked at me over the rim of his glass. The way another's voice dropped an octave when he said my name. The way their presence filled the air like smoke. Thick, intoxicating, dangerous. They weren't safe. Not like he was. But maybe that was the point. Because I didn't want safe anymore. I wanted risk. I wanted hunger. I wanted to see myself in the eyes of men who didn't have to love me, but chose to want me anyway. Even if just for one night. Even if it ruined everything. There's a part of every woman, I think, buried under the weight of being good, that longs to be wild. Not reckless. Not cruel. just uncontained. And mine had been quiet for years, muted under dinner plans and Sunday routines, softened by kindness, silenced by gratitude. But that night, when I heard them laughing outside, my hunger woke up, and she was done being silent. It was a slow evening, the kind where the air presses in soft against your skin, and the wine tastes a little sweeter just because it's quiet. The cicadas had started to sing, and the friends his friends had left, their laughter lingering like perfume. We were alone again, the way we always were, just the two of us in the soft lamplight. Him nursing the last of his drink, me watching the ice melt in mine. And then, he looked at me. Really looked. Not with the usual tenderness, but with something deeper. Something searching. His voice was quiet when he asked it. Am I not enough? No bitterness. No accusation. Just truth. Like he already knew. Like he'd always known, and had been waiting for me to admit it. I didn't answer right away, because the easy lie was sitting there on my tongue. You are. Of course you are. But I couldn't say it. Not this time. So I swallowed the lie. Let the silence stretch between us like a held breath. And then I said the truest thing I've ever said. You are. But I'm not whole. Not just with you. His eyes didn't change. He didn't flinch. He just set down his glass, leaned closer, and whispered, what if I didn't have to be the only one? That's when it happened. That shift. Like a window cracking open in a room I thought had no air. I felt it. The hush of possibility rushing in behind his words. The weight of years lifting slightly. As if he was finally letting go of the idea that love had to look like ownership. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because suddenly I didn't know where the lines were anymore. Or if they'd ever been real. I just looked at him. At the man who had always given me everything he knew how. And I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Permission. Not surrender. Not indifference. But permission. He reached for my hand. Held it. If I could give you more. He said slowly. Without losing you, would you let me? My breath caught. Because that wasn't just a question. That was a key. To every locked part of me. To every night I'd laid awake aching for something I didn't have the language for. To the woman I kept buried beneath all the right choices. Would I let him? Would I walk through a door he was willing to open? Just so I could finally feel whole? Even if it meant breaking the shape of what we were? Even if it meant stepping into something I couldn't take back? I looked at him. This man who had always held me like something precious. And I realized that maybe loving someone doesn't always mean keeping them in your arms. Maybe, sometimes it means holding the door open and trusting they'll come back. So I nodded. Soft, small, but real. And in that nod, the world shifted. Not in a loud way, but in the way all forbidden things begin. Quiet, tender, trembling, with a single question. That changes everything. It was a weekend gathering. The kind that crept up slowly. As if the air itself had conspired to hold us all in one place just a little longer. Warm weather. Too much wine. Laughter that lingered like something sacred. My father had left earlier that evening. An overnight trip, casual, expected. He kissed my cheek. Thanked the men for their help with the garden. And drove off with the easy trust of a man who had known them all his life. That left just us. Me, him, and them. The three who had always been careful. Always polite. Always a step too distant. I'd grown used to their restraint. To the way their eyes would flick away when I walked into a room. To the silence that would fall when I bent to pick something up. Or the way one of them would clear his throat whenever my shirt slipped just slightly off my shoulder. They had manners. Respect. The kind of discipline that only made the tension worse. Because I knew, even if they never said it, I knew they saw me. And I had seen them too. That night, everything was slower. The air was heavy with stillness. The house hummed with things unspoken. He was quiet, thoughtful, more watching than speaking. We moved around each other like we were preparing for something, but pretending we weren't. And then, he came to me, hands loose, voice steady, but there was a flicker behind his eyes, a tremor beneath the calm. "I'm going to let them in," he said, softly, like a prayer. "Only if you want it." I didn't speak. I just nodded. Once, but inside me, a storm. Lightning behind my ribs, thunder in my throat. My heart, loud enough I was sure they could hear it through the walls. Because this was no longer fantasy, no longer whispered ache in the dark. This was happening. I heard the footsteps first. Slow, deliberate, 3 different waits. A door opened, then silence. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to, because I could feel them. Their presence filled the room like a shift in air pressure. Thick and dense and impossibly real. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They just waited, as if the room belonged to me now, as if they would not cross the threshold of this moment, unless I gave them permission. And still I didn't speak, because something ancient had taken root in me, some quiet knowing that words would only break the spell. So I stood, let the silence stretch, let the weight of what was about to happen settle into my bones. I felt his presence just behind me, the one who loved me first, the one who said yes to letting me go, so I could come back more whole. And then I stepped forward, just slightly, just enough, and they followed. Still no words, only breath, only tension, only the slow, unbearable unfolding of a moment we had all secretly imagined, and now could no longer unimagine. They circled around me like a tide, not closing in, not yet, just orbiting, studying, waiting for the cue that would tell them I was ready to fall apart. And in that stillness, in that pulsing quiet, I realized I wasn't afraid. I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't asking for forgiveness or pretending to be confused. I knew what I was doing, and I wanted it, all of it. It wasn't about greed or lust or rebellion. It was about finally stepping into the part of myself that I had always been too careful to touch. The woman who could hold multiple eyes on her skin and not shrink. The woman who could be wanted without boundaries and still remain sovereign, still remain herself. They moved in closer slowly, each with their own rhythm, each with a silence that said, "We've been waiting too." And in that space between the waiting and the touch, I felt it, the shift, the break, the beginning of something I could never take back, of something I never wanted to. The first step was slow. He was the oldest, the one who had always been there in the background, watching, waiting, never pushing. When he stepped closer, I felt the weight of years between us, years of restraint, years of quiet longing, unspoken but heavy in the air. He looked at me like I was something precious, like a rare thing he had only dreamed of holding, fragile but not in need of protection. His hands were warm, firm, like he had always known how to touch without asking. When he finally touched me, it was as though the world softened beneath his fingers. He didn't rush. He didn't demand. He just let his hands trail slowly, deliberately along my skin, almost as if he feared I might disappear at any moment. And in his touch, I felt something I hadn't known I'd needed. Reverence. Like he was honoring me. My body, my silence, my surrender. The air around us thickened, and with each slow caress, I felt my own heartbeat sync with his. There were no words, only the space between us, filled with the kind of reverence that made me feel whole for the first time in so long, as though he had seen me for everything I was. Then he stepped back, the one who had been quieter, more reserved. But not tonight. Tonight, there was a fire in him that made his presence almost unbearable. He leaned in close, so close that I could feel the heat of his breath, the pulse in his neck, the steady, measured rhythm of him. His eyes were dark, heavy with something I couldn't name but felt deeply in my chest. He was asking for something, no, demanding something. But not with words. He touched me where no one had dared. Where I had kept myself hidden. A place so vulnerable, so raw, that I had never allowed anyone to see it, let alone touch it. But with him, there was no hesitation. No thought to the risk. Just the burning need to be seen. His fingers traced the curve of my ribs, the dip of my spine, the pulse between my thighs. Every movement slow, deliberate, but with such intensity that it made my breath catch. I was afraid. I was thrilled. I was trembling, but not in fear and anticipation. He pressed closer, and I could feel his heartbeat against my skin. The overwhelming truth of him filled me, the depth of the emotion he was pouring into the touch. I didn't know whether to pull away or give in completely. And then came the third. The one who was always quiet, who never needed to speak. Because he already knew. With him, I didn't have to explain anything. There was no question, no permission. He saw me. He understood me in a way that made my breath shallow. He didn't need to ask. He simply acted. Reading the subtle shifts in my body. The way my pulse quickened. The slight hitch in my breath. And I gave in. For the first time, I stopped controlling. Stopped holding myself together. Stopped pretending to be the woman I thought I was supposed to be. His hands were confident, unhurried. Like he had all the time in the world to make me surrender to him completely. I didn't resist. I didn't fight. In his touch, I felt the command in the silence. The way he held me without owning me. He had no need to explain himself. He just acted. And I let him. His hands were everywhere. His mouth brushing my skin like a promise. And then, too, their hands came from different directions. Their mouths, their voices. Synchronizing in a way that felt almost divine. One on my lips, one on my neck, hands on my thighs, on my breasts, on my hips, in a rhythm so synchronized that I didn't know where one ended and the other began. Their touches overlapped, layered, each movement feeding into the next, until I was trembling, until my whole body hummed with the overwhelming force of it. There was no distinction, no clarity, only them, two at once, not separate, not apart, just together. The sensations built and built, an overwhelming wave that crashed over me again and again. My body responded without thinking, without hesitation. I surrendered fully. And in that surrender, I felt myself unravel. It was as though my very being was coming undone. But it wasn't scary. It wasn't wrong. It was a kind of freedom I hadn't known existed. And then, all three. There were no more questions. No more silence. No more space between us. Just them. Their hands were everywhere. On my skin. In my hair. On my lips. On my heart. Every inch of me was covered. Touched. Held. I wasn't just being touched anymore. I was being rewritten. Like a tide that rose higher and higher, pushing me deeper into the water. Until I could no longer feel where I ended. And the sea began. I felt my body shift. My heart shift. My mind shift. They moved in perfect synchrony. Each one filling a part of me I hadn't known was empty. Their touch was no longer just desire. It was understanding. It was seeing me. All of me. Not just as a woman. Not just as a body. But as something whole. Something complete. I didn't know where I ended. Where I began. But I didn't care. All I knew was that in that moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. And then, it happened. One long, breathless moment. I don't remember who touched me first, or in what order. I don't remember how the air felt, or the sound of their breath. But I remember the way everything inside me broke open. It wasn't just the heat, or the touch, or the pressure. It was everything. A flooding, a falling, a flying, all at once. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. And yet, I was alive in a way I had never been before. It wasn't pleasure in the way I'd been taught to think of it. Not like the soft, careful love we'd shared before. This was something raw. Something primal. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't about bodies. It was about freedom. For the first time, I didn't have to be careful. I didn't have to hold back. I cried. Not from pain. Not from the weight of it all. But because I could finally breathe. Finally feel. Feel everything. Without holding myself back. I cried because I wasn't pretending anymore. Because I was not the woman who kept herself small. Quiet and contained. Not the woman who only gave what was asked for. Who held herself inside a box made of rules and expectations. No, I was the woman who was allowed to fall apart. I was the woman who didn't need to be perfect, who could be anything. Be everything. Without apology. And I felt it. In every part of me. The walls I had built. The shame. The silence. The years of smallness that I had wrapped around myself like armor. They were gone. Stillness. Just breath. And the weight of 3 hands. Each one holding me in a different way. Each one holding me together when I could not hold myself. I felt them there. Their touch grounding me. Pulling me back when I was soaring too high. Their fingers soft, firm, tender. Just enough to remind me I was real. I wasn't lost. Not anymore. And in that moment, I knew. I was no longer the girl who waited for permission. I was the woman who took what she wanted. And became whole because of it. There was no going back. There was no pretending anymore. I wasn't just seen. I was known. And in the quiet that followed, I felt a peace settle over me. A kind of peace that comes only after you've been fully broken open. And remade in the process. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to explain. Because for the first time, I knew exactly who I was. I didn't know when he had come back. I didn't know when he had entered the room. But I felt his presence before I saw him. It was a quiet shift in the air. Like a subtle change in the room's temperature. A shift of energy I couldn't ignore. And when I looked up, there he was. Standing in the doorway. Eyes wide. Filled with something I couldn't name. Tears, awe. A deep, raw understanding. I had expected. I don't even know what I had expected. But not this. Not him standing there. Watching. He hadn't left. He hadn't pulled away. He hadn't turned his back on me. He had stayed. Stayed to witness. Not to control. Not to claim. But to watch me become whole. His eyes moved over me slowly. As though memorizing every inch of me. Every bruise. Every mark. Every part of me that had been hidden. But no longer. He took a step forward. Slowly, cautiously. As if afraid I would break if he touched me. Then he knelt beside me. His hands hovering just above my skin. Almost as though asking for permission. And when he spoke, his voice was low. Raw. Like he had been holding this back for too long. You're more than I ever knew. There was no judgment in his eyes. No anger. No resentment. Just that same awe. That same wonder. And then he said, soft but certain, I still want all of you. I didn't know what to say. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't reaching anymore. I wasn't searching. Chasing after some elusive version of myself. That I thought I had to be. I was complete. For the first time, I felt it. I felt whole. I was no longer that woman who tried to fit into the mold. No longer the woman who tried to prove she was enough. I wasn't someone who was lacking. Someone who needed to be fixed. Someone who needed saving. I was the woman who had allowed herself to be seen. And in being seen, had found something deeper than I ever imagined. And as I looked at him, kneeling beside me, his eyes filled with love, understanding, and acceptance, I knew I was no longer just his. I was mine, and I had never been more free. The room was still. The weight of what had passed between us hung in the air like a faint echo, soft and fragile. And as I looked at him, still kneeling beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder, his breath steady but deep, I couldn't help but ask myself, sometimes loving someone means letting them be bigger than your arms can hold. It means watching them break free from the cage they built around themselves and realizing they don't need saving. They just need space to be everything they are. And so, the question lingered in my mind. If it meant giving her what she truly needed, would you let it happen? Would you let go of the need to own, to possess, and allow someone to grow beyond your understanding of them? Or is love always about holding on, about keeping them close, about knowing that you're the only one they'll ever need? What if love isn't about possession at all? What if it's about devotion? The kind that lets the other person bloom, even if it means they become someone more than you ever thought they could be? Would you let them grow? Even if that meant you had to step back? Even if it meant watching them transform into something that could no longer be contained? And then I thought, is it enough to love someone fully if they have to change for you? Tell me, what would you do? Would you let go to hold on in a way that's deeper than you've ever imagined? I'm genuinely curious. And if you've felt this too, if you've been touched by this story in ways you can't explain, subscribe to Olivia Touching Tales. Let's keep feeling. Because sometimes, that's all we need.